All right, so the digestive system. On Wednesday, we'll do nutrition. Those two chapters will go together. So we have mechanical and chemical breakdown. So when you hear mechanical, just think of physically breaking things down. So that would be chewing. That mechanically breaks food down into smaller parts. Chemical, that's going to be at the molecular level. So here they're breaking chemical bonds. And that also starts in the mouth as well. So we break chemical bonds with our saliva. So we do both at the beginning of digestion, both mechanical and chemical breakdown. We have a complete tube from mouth to anus. So just think of it as one long twisty tube. Food goes in, excess waste goes out. So that's the canal. If it is not part of the tube, aka the alimentary canal, then it's an accessory organ. So it makes it easy. If it's not part of the tube, it must be an organ. So an example, the tongue. Right? The tongue helps you in digestion, but it's not part of the tube. Your saliva glands, right? They help digest, but it's not part of the tube. Liver, gallbladder, pancreas, etc. If it's not part of the tube, it's an accessory organ to the digestive system. Mucosa. So we have multiple layers. So here they're talking about the innermost layer. That is the mucosa. The next layer is the submucosa. Right? And then you have a thick layer that's made out of muscle. So that's the muscle layer. So that's the inside. Mucus is secreted on the inside of the tube. Right? So that's the mucosa layer. Submucosa, this is where we're going to be absorbing nutrients, because this is where the blood vessels are. We need to absorb the nutrients into the blood vessel. So we have that muscle layer, and then on the outermost surface, that's going to be the serosa. Right? So there's actually going to be 4 different layers we're going to talk about. Here's that muscle layer. Of course, when that contracts, it allows for materials to move. So since it's smooth muscle, voluntary or involuntary? Involuntary. So food moves as soon as you swallow it halfway down your esophagus. Food is no longer under your control. It's all involuntary because the organs are all smooth muscle. So that outer layer, right, on the outside of the tube is the serosa. Mucus on the inside of the tube. Watery stuff, the serosa, on the outside. All right. Visceral. What is this membrane against? The wall or the organ? The organ. Very good. So the intestines, right, that outer surface is going to make watery stuff. That's the visceral peritoneum. And in your abdominal cavity, the membrane that's covering the cavity, that's the parietal peritoneum. And we'll go into the importance of this membrane. So if I'm touching the intestines, visceral peritoneum. If I am touching the cavity of the abdominal wall, then on the parietal peritoneum. But both are going to make watery secretion, because when your intestines move about, we don't want it to stick against your abdominal wall. All right, movement. So we got churning, mixing. So the movement is called peristalsis. And that's because we have a tube, and peri means around. So this tube is going to contract all the way around. So you can see here, it's contracting around. So the wave-like movements, peristalsis, will help push or propel the contents forward. That movement within the intestines is called motility. So how fast your intestines are moving is the motility. Between your cheek and gums, you have your buccal cavity. So when people chew tobacco or when you're supposed to do the nicotine gum, that's where you place the drug. And there's certain lozenges you want to put in that buccal cavity as well. Mechanical digestion, that's just the physical breakdown. Our chemical digestion has to be or is done with enzymes. So you know it's an enzyme if it ends in ASE. And whatever's in front of it tells you what the enzyme breaks down. Alright, so the first tracing for food is going to be past your lips. Once it passes your lips, it's going to then pass your teeth. So those are the first two. Pass your lips, pass your teeth, and then pass your tongue. Easy enough for the first three tracing. What's the word root for tongue in medical terminology? Yeah, so there's two of them. There's gloss and there's also lingua. So the thing at the bottom of your tongue that helps connects it, that's the frenulum. And then you'll have bumps on your tongue as well. Those are just tonsils. So you'll have tonsils on the roof of your mouth. Those are your palatine tonsils. You'll have them on your tongue. So those big bumpy patches on the back of your tongue, they're supposed to be there. Those are your lingual tonsils. That little hangy bally thingy, uvula. Hard palate is where there is bone on the roof of your mouth. And soft palate, that's usually the culprit in snoring. You have excess tissue there, and it vibrates as you breathe in and out. Lymphatic system. So that's in Med 111. So the lymphatic system is part of your immune system. So all those tonsils are glands. So as your lymphatic system filters fluids, it's going to filter out any bacteria and any pathogens through the tonsils. So when they're swollen and inflamed, that's because they're fighting an infection. So palatine on your palate. So these are the ones on the roof of your mouth. Saliva glands. Part of the alimentary canal or an accessory organ? Is it part of the tube or not part of the tube? Accessory, right? So it's not part of the tube. We have 3 pairs. So that's a total of 6, right? So it's going to produce serous, right? So that's that liquidy fluid, just like your peritoneal. Amylase, so that is the enzyme in your saliva that allows for chemical breakdown of food. So we're turning starches chemically into single sugars instantly in our mouth with saliva, the amylase from saliva. So amyl is just like a carbohydrate bond, a sugar bond. You have the parotoid. So with your tongue, if you feel on the inside of your cheek, on the upper roof, with your tongue, you can actually feel for the port, the opening to the parotoid gland. Sometimes when you take your first bite of food and it hurts, right? That's the contraction of your parotoid gland. Then you have it under your jaw, submandible, and then under your tongue, sublingual. So 3 pairs for a total of 6. Teeth. We have deciduous teeth. Deciduous, di just means 2 sets. So we have a child set and then the adult set, where your molars and your wisdom tooth comes in. So incisors, those are for cropping. So if it was like a horse, those teeth in their front help them nip the grass, right? So they help them clip the grass. So canines are the sharp teeth. They allow for grip. And then once you take a bite, the molars, aka bicuspids, those are for grinding. So we snip some grass and then we crush it down in the molars. Pharynx. So remember, it's connected to the nose. It's connected to the mouth, and then also to the larynx as well. So we got two tubes. We got an air tube and a food tube. So when you open your mouth and food goes in, it has to pass the air tube first. Right? So your trachea needs to be covered with the epiglottis before it goes down the food tube. So that's a poor design, and that comes from us being fish. Fish, they don't have lungs, but they have a swim bladder, and that was the design of fish. So when we stood upright, food has to go past the air tube. All right, swallowing. So the epiglottis will cover the larynx. That way food does not enter into the airway. Muscles of the pharynx contract, and then the food is forced down. At about halfway down your esophagus, that's when it's no longer under your control. It's all smooth muscle at that point, and your involuntary systems will take over. Now, from the esophagus to the stomach, you have a very weak sphincter called the cardiac sphincter. So this guy is weak. And that is what causes heartburn. Because it's a very weak sphincter, it allows for acid in the stomach to go back up into the esophagus. The stomach is protected from the acid, but the esophagus, there is no protection. There's no mucus, there's no buffer system to protect the esophagus. So that acid can erode away, and right next to the cardiac sphincter, very tight area, you have your lungs and your heart. So you can actually burn a hole through your esophagus, into your heart, into your lungs. So acid reflux can be dangerous. All right, the tracing. So past the lips, past the teeth, past the tongue, right? And then you're going to enter into the back of the throat, the oral pharynx. Then you got the epiglottis, and then the esophagus. Okay. Cardiac sphincter. Then you have the fundus of the stomach. So that's the dome portion of the stomach. The body of the stomach. Then the bottom of the stomach is called the pyloric. The opening from the diaphragm, where the esophagus leads into the stomach, is the esophageal hiatus. Sometimes you can get the stomach popping up through this opening, and that is called a hernia. Right? So you can get an esophageal hernia where your stomach is literally sticking up out of your throat. Cardiac sphincter, very weak band of muscles. Every time we burp, right, it has to open up. So that's how weak that cardiac sphincter is. Stomach. Not a lot of nutrients is absorbed here. Some drugs, some water, some alcohol, but most of the absorption is going to be in the small intestines. So with the mucus and the food, as you chew, you swallow, that one gulp, that's called a bolus. And as it mixes with the acid in the stomach, before it enters the small intestines, it's called acid chyme, or just chyme for short. So if this is acid, what do you think your small intestine has to be? Base. Very good. So in order to neutralize that acid chyme, the first part of your small intestine, the duodenum, is very, very basic to neutralize that acid. The dome portion is the fundus, then you got the body, and then the lower portion of the stomach is the pylorus. And this sphincter, the pyloric sphincter, is a very strong sphincter. And you should be lucky that it's strong, because anything after the pyloric sphincter is going to be considered fecal matter. So this one, for most of us, is a one-way valve. So along your GI tract, it releases a lot of hormones. So the signaling isn't done via the nervous system. You'd think that the brain would be able to connect wires and control it, but what the GI system does is it'll release a lot of hormones into the bloodstream for other parts of the GI tract to detect. So the stomach is going to release certain compounds to let the intestines know, hey, food is going to be coming your way soon. So the communication is via hormones instead of nerves. Parasympathetic. Of course, that is going to stimulate rest and digest. And this has to do with blood supply. So your blood is either needed for moving your body, thinking, or digesting. So those three things is what your blood is delegated to. And you can't do all three at once. So right after a meal, your body's going to say, hey, I need to allocate blood to the GI system. So that's why it says rest and digest. That way you're not moving about, running around. Cholecyst. So the cholecyst is the gallbladder. So chol is bile or gall, and then cyst is just a bladder, any bladder. So think of cholesterol, because bile is required to absorb fats. So here the intestines is signaling, hey, do I need bile or if I don't need bile? Here's the dome portion of the stomach, the fundus, the main portion, the body, and down at the lower portion we have the pylorus. Very important one-way valve is that pyloric sphincter, because that leads to the first part of the small intestines, the duodenum. It's only about 12 inches long, but all the digestive juices from the pancreas and the liver will enter into the duodenum for further enzymatic breakdown of the chyme. Rugae, that's just the folds and wrinkles of the stomach. And on those folds, there's actually small projections called villi. And on those small projections, there's actually even smaller projections called microvilli. And what those things do is it increases surface area for absorption. So most of the nutrients is absorbed here in the small intestines. Once you're in the large intestines, you're relegated to salt and water, right? So all the nutrients in the small intestines. First portion, second portion, third portion. So here, it's only about a foot long, about 12 inches. Your duodenum, ileum, they're going to be a lot longer. The blood vessels that absorb all the nutrients collect in what's called the mesentery. So that is all the blood vessels and all the nerves that inundate the intestines. Right? So there's so many nerves in your intestines that they call that your second brain. Because your stomach has to know what your intestines is doing, your intestines has to know what the other part of the intestines is doing, and they communicate through nerves and chemicals. So that is your second brain. And based on your diet, that can control how you think. Have you guys ever gotten a craving? Who's doing the craving? Is it your brain or your gut? Yeah, a lot of it is your second brain in the gut, and more so the bacteria in your gut, because they're sending a signal to your brain, I need more sugar. Right? And then that's what you crave, sugar. Microvilli. So those are the micro projections I mentioned. So they increase surface area for absorption. So nutrients goes directly into the bloodstream except for fats. So fats do not get absorbed into the mesentery. Right? So everything is absorbed into that mesentery, sent to the liver for processing. Fats enter via the lymphatic system. So a little bit different. If I end in ASE, what am I? Enzyme. So the name tells you what it breaks down. Peptide bonds are in proteins. So this guy is going to break down proteins. Sucrose, you guys heard of sucrose? So here's the enzyme that breaks down that sugar. My favorite sugar, maltose. You guys heard of maltose? Malting barley for beer. Malt liquor? No? Alright, fine then. So that breaks down the sugar maltose. You guys heard of lactose? Lactase is the enzyme that breaks down lactose sugar. Anybody lactose intolerant? You're not allergic, you just don't make this guy. So you can't digest it, builds up, gives you gas, bloating. What are lipids? Fats. So this enzyme is going to break down fats. So the name of the enzyme tells you what it breaks down. Rest and digest, of course. And then stretching of the intestinal wall. Well, it's weird. Your intestines have different types of pain receptors, right? So during surgery, if the surgeon cuts your intestines, you're not going to feel it. But if it's stretched, like if you have gas bloating, then you'll feel that pain. So it kind of works a little bit differently. So as mentioned, mostly the nutrients absorbed there. What's left over is salt and water. So that's why dehydration's hard to treat, because that's the last part of your intestines that the salt and water needs to get to. Ileocecal. So the third part of your intestines, small intestines, RD, is the ileum. So we have the duodenum, jejunum, ileum, and then connecting it to the large intestines, before we get to the large intestines, we have the cecum. And the cecum is a blind-ended sac. We'll go to the image. The appendix is just sticking right off the cecum. So we got the duodenum. So here the duodenum is very short, just about a foot long. The jejunum, half of the small intestines, and the other half is the ileum. So right at the end of the ileum, we're going to connect to the cecum. So for us, it's just a little pouch that sticks out. For animals that eat a lot of plant matter, it takes longer to digest, so they have a larger cecum. And then right off of it is the appendix, aka the vermiform. So it looks like a worm. And then you have your ascending colon, poop goes up, poop goes over. So that's the transverse colon. What goes up must come down. So that's the descending colon. And then poop does a little wiggle in the sigmoid colon, and then it goes out. So poop goes up, poop goes over, poop goes down, does a little wiggle to let you know it's about to come, and then out the rectum, right? So anybody who holds right here and says, Oh, my stomach hurts. What's actually hurting? Poop going over. So in about 5-10 minutes, fireworks. The cecum. So for us, it's small, blind-ended sac. The appendix, it may have a function. It may have lost its function. But if you get it blocked, then the bacteria can accumulate. If it bursts, then you have an infection condition, sepsis condition. Poop goes up, poop goes over, poop goes down. What's it called when it makes a little wiggle? Sigmoid. So sigmoid just means S shape. And then, so the rectum is usually empty, right? When you're potty training a kid and you tell them, you know that feeling you gotta go? If they're too young, they have no idea because the nerves have not reached their rectum yet. So that tingly feeling you're telling them about, they have no idea. So you can't really potty train until the nerves are connected and they can actually feel that tingly feeling. And then you have the anal canal and the anus. Two sphincters there. You have an internal one, involuntary, and then the external one, voluntary. When you're young, you don't feel it, so sometimes you go. And then when you're old, you get forgetful and you forget to control the external sphincter. Feces, everything is left over. And then, have you guys heard of the squatty potty? You guys never heard of the squatty potty? Some of you guys have. So the regular position, the Western position, the poopies, right? Where you're sitting here with your legs down, right? That does not open up the colon. So the best way is to have your feet up. So they make this device. You can just use a stool. And then you're supposed to put your feet up, or they say the best position is squatting. Squatting to poop. Now open and relax everything for easier defecation. Have you tried it? He hasn't tried it, but at least he heard of it. He's seen it. So if you're having problems, you might just roll that garbage can over in front of you and put your feet up and see if it helps. The squatty potty. All right, so your second brain. So all of this is controlled by nerve response. And as you can see, all the nutrients is being absorbed into this membrane. So this membrane is called the mesentery. And all that nutrients is going to be collected into the portal vein. So the portal vein leads to the liver. So this is what's referred to as first pass metabolism, because everything absorbed through the GI tract is going to go to the liver first. So if it's toxic, at least our liver has a chance to neutralize it. Right? If it's something we need, then the liver can take care of it right away. Where is fat absorbed? Yeah, lymphatic. Very good. So you remember the lymphatic system. So that means, does fat go to the liver for first pass metabolism? No. Good fats, bad fats go straight into your blood supply, right? Bypassing the liver, because it doesn't go into the cardiovascular system, it goes into the lymphatic system. The liver. The liver is just a supercharged enzyme producing machine. That's all it makes. Enzymes, enzymes. So these enzymes carry out chemical processes, breaking down nutrients and building up nutrients. The liver makes bile, but where is bile stored? Gallbladder. Right? We'll go to the image where you'll see where the bile duct and the cystic duct and the bile duct. So that means the pancreas and the liver, where all those secretions come together and enter into the duodenum. So it has secretions from the liver, and the pancreas has its secretions as well. Can you live without a gallbladder? Are you still making bile? Yeah, because who's making bile? The liver, right? So the gallbladder is just a storage site. So if you don't have your gallbladder, that just means there's bile entering your intestines, just a little bit. Whatever you're producing, instead of getting stored for use, it just enters in. So that means you can't eat large amounts of fats. You have to regulate how much fat you eat at once. So what bile does is emulsifies the fat. Blood is mostly water, and as we know, water and fats, they repel, right? So in order to get water and fat to mix, we got to emulsify it. We got to make our blood creamy, right? If our blood is oily, what happens? Separates, right? Oil and water will separate. So just like salad dressing, Italian dressing, you got your olive oil and your vinegar. You shake it up, it mixes, but it separates. So you want to add an emulsifying agent. So you can add mustard, or you can add some egg yolk, something that will allow both things to blend that normally won't. So that's what bile does. It just allows the fat to blend with all the water in your blood. So this is the underside of the liver, and all you gotta know is that's where the gallbladder is, right on the bottom side. So this enzyme breaks down sugar bonds. So amylase, that's sugar. This enzyme breaks down fats. This enzyme breaks down DNA material, right? Nucleotides, nucleases. So this enzyme breaks down proteins. So these are all different types of proteins, trypsin, peptide bonds. So depending on the name, it tells you what it breaks down. So here you'll see the common bile duct. So from the liver and gallbladder, its secretion will join with the pancreas secretion. These aren't the endocrine functions, we're talking about the exocrine, so the digestive juices. If this clogs, then all of those digestive enzymes will back up in the pancreas. And if these juices are good at digesting food, what do you think it's good at digesting also? The pancreas, right? So if there's a blockage, you can get gallstones, you can get things here that block it. You have a back door. So this is your back door just in case. So any backage, you have a second door here. Now if both are clogged, then it's a medical emergency. You need your pancreas. If it starts dissolving itself, then that's it, you're dead. All right, one last thing before we go to break. Bicarbonate. So bicarbonate is a buffer. So remember, the duodenum is going to take in all that acid from the acid chyme in the stomach. So it needs to be able to neutralize that acid quickly. And it does that with bicarbonate ions. So that's our buffer system. The stomach is also protected by bicarbonate as well. So here's that parasympathetic nervous system again for rest and digest. And then you got your other hormones being secreted. All right, nutritional needs. So carbohydrates, what does our body use carbs for? Energy. Energy. Some building. Proteins, of course, That's going to be for building and repair. And some of our hormones are actually proteins. Lipids, many function. So energy is one of them. And then also that functions, especially steroids, as hormones as well. So these three are what they called macronutrients. So we need relatively large amounts of carbs, proteins, and lipids every day. And our micronutrients are here. So vitamins and minerals are micronutrients. We don't need so much of it every day. Then of course we need water. That helps everything absorb and distribute. Vitamins usually come from a living source, whereas minerals, those are things like metals from the earth. So vitamins and minerals are used by enzymes most of the time. So if you are deficient in a vitamin or a mineral, then the enzyme can't do its job. For example, no iron, what happens? No good hemoglobin, which means you can't carry, because you can't make red blood cells, right? So this is a mineral that we need just a little bit of, but if we don't have enough, big problems can raise. So here's the enzyme, right? The protein that needs the mineral in order to carry oxygen. Carbohydrates, so starches, polysaccharides. So one sugar connected to another one, disaccharides, right? Poly just means there's many. So your carbohydrates, complex carbs, that's just a bunch of sugars. When they say simple carbs, they mean sugars that are usually just in pairs or by themselves. So we have complex, simple. So when we digest in our saliva, we're turning these complex carbs instantly into simple carbs via amylase in the saliva. Animals don't make starch like potato. We make a storage compound called glycogen. Have you guys heard of carbo loading? Anybody play sports? So 4 quarters, right? 4 quarters. You gotta last all 4 quarters. So especially with football. So the night before, we eat a big starchy meal, pasta, bread, and in our liver, it's gonna make this starch, this glycogen, this sugar storage. So when you're on the field and 4th quarter comes, you don't gas out. You still have energy in your liver. So that's what they mean by carbo loading, building up your energy storage. Cellulose. What's cellulose made out of? What are things ending in OSE? Sugar, yeah. Don't be shy. Yeah, sugar, you're correct. All right, so cellulose is sugar, but here's an example of cellulose. Is paper sweet? You guys chewed paper before, right? Does it have a lot of energy? Yeah, it has a lot of energy, right? If you light it, it's gonna, yeah. So cellulose paper, it's made out of sugar. It's just they're combined in a different way where we can't break it down. So no matter how much you try to chew paper, is it ever gonna taste sweet to you? No, all right? But if you chew starch, the enzymes in our saliva can break that down into sugar. Because we can't break it down, it stays in our gut and it holds on to a lot of water, right? So if you want to be regular, eat a lot of fiber. It holds on to water. It helps your body slowly absorb sugars because it's kind of jelly-like substance. So your sugar doesn't spike too much. And it prevents toxins from being absorbed in your body. So that's what fiber does in your gut. But you also have soluble fiber. fiber that actually is absorbed into your bloodstream, and it's that soluble fiber that reduces your cholesterol. So when they say Cheerios, oatmeal, things like that, that's the soluble fiber reducing fats in the blood. Metamicil? Metamucil, yeah. Yeah, Metamucil is pure fiber. If you ever want to play with slime, get Metamucil, put it in boiling water, and it'll turn into like this gooey, slimy substance. So that's the exact same thing that fiber does in your gut. It helps you slowly absorb sugar, and it holds on to toxins. So, lipids for energy. So in order to burn fat, you have to burn all the sugar in your blood first. So if you want to do fat burning, it's going to be like an hour of aerobic exercise. You have to do that bike, that run for at least an hour. You got to burn all your sugar first, and then your body will start burning the fat. Try. How many in a try? 3. So we have a glyceride, that's the cart. If it's 1 fatty acid, monoglyceride. If it's 2, it's a diglyceride. And the most fatty acids a glycerol can carry is 3. So you have a triglyceride. Cholesterol has a couple functions in the body, multiple functions. Building blocks of hormones. Testosterone, very similar to cholesterol. Vitamin D, similar. Estrogen, similar. They're all the backbone of cholesterol. Other function is cell membranes. It's a component of your cell membrane. Vitamins. So we have our water-soluble vitamins. These ones are easy. All the B vitamins and C. That's all you have to remember. Everything else is then fat-soluble. A, D, E, and K. Right? Which one can you develop a deficiency for quickly, where you'll lose it quickly out of your body? Yeah, water-soluble vitamins, right? Because every time you urinate, you're losing your water-soluble vitamins. So when you drink a Monster Energy, it has tons and tons of B vitamins. That super bright neon highlighter urine that you pass, that's all the B vitamins. So that means you need your water-soluble vitamins daily. Your fat-soluble vitamins, it's going to take longer for you to deplete them. Do you know which vitamins are your antioxidants? You guys heard of antioxidants, radicals, right? Vitamin A, C, and E are your antioxidants. So they're very beneficial. They prevent damage to your body. So vitamins come from living. Minerals, that just comes from the dirt. So the enzymes need vitamins and minerals. They use them as tools. So the enzymes are the workers. And in order for the workers to break down things, build things up, they need their tools. So if you don't have your tools, then the enzymes can't work. So a lot of your disease states might just be a vitamin deficiency, a mineral deficiency. For proteins, there are 20 different proteins. There are about 8 that are essential. That means our body can make most of these proteins, but these 8 we have to get from our diet. So if you are a vegetarian and you're not eating animal protein, you may not be getting the entire amino acid profile. You might have deficiencies that develop. So supplement your essential protein needs in that case. Any vegans? No vegans? Any vegetarians? No? Everyone likes meat, steak? Well done, medium, or rare?
Medium.
Medium? I can live with medium. If you say well done, then you have to leave the classroom. Aging. Movement slows down. Absorption decreases. Ability to detoxify blood, right? Lower liver function. So everything slows down in aging. More likely to develop cancers and ulcers. So, colonoscopy. You guys heard of a colonoscopy? So that's a camera. So they're going to insert a camera and they're looking at the entire colon and they're looking for little papules. So just little bumps, outcroppings that grow within the intestines. So if they catch those papules and they eliminate them early, most likely it won't develop into cancers. So for adults, 50 years plus, if it runs in the family, you're going to have to get a colonoscopy a lot earlier, maybe in your 40s. But adults in your 50, you're going to start getting those colonoscopies.
How often are you supposed to get those things?
Depending on your risks, they might be every other year, it might be every year. So he's curious because he's getting there up in age.
No, because I'm getting one next month.
There you go. So he's getting one next month. So yeah, depending on history and what they discover on this one, they might just do it every other year or they might increase it to every year. Dietary changes, yeah. Aging, isolation, depression. They might eat more, eat less. As we age, we lose muscle. So muscle allows us to burn calories because it's making heat. So as we age, we need less calories. So elderly patients, if they don't adjust their caloric intake, they're going to gain a lot of weight. All right, conditions. So we're almost done. Just a few of these conditions, and then we'll get into the in-class assignment. So inflammation of the appendix. So there are some theories on the purpose of the appendix. A lot of people think it has an immune function. Others believe that when we were not very smart, if we ate food that was bad and we get severe diarrhea, we would lose all of our good bacteria, but at least the appendix will hold on to a little bit of good bacteria and that'll regrow in our gut. So there's a lot of theories, but who knows? Today, not so much of a function. Cirrhosis, so a conditioning of hardening. So in this case, the liver is one of the organs that can actually regenerate. So you can actually donate part of your liver and your liver will grow back, and that donated portion hopefully will grow into a full liver as well. So it's very resilient, and it's really bad once you start to get liver damage. That means you beat it to hell. So scar tissue replaces the hepatocytes, and that scar tissue isn't making any enzymes. So it's just hardening the liver, and that can lead to cancer. If the liver does not know what to do to a toxin, it holds on to it. So throughout your life, your liver is accumulating toxins. That's why a liver shot is so devastating, is that all those toxins are now leaked into your body. So after a liver shot or damage to the liver, you'll feel sick for about a week. Cholelithiasis. So what's a lith? Stone. Megalithic structure, right? Monolithic, one big stone. So here you have gallstones. It could be proteins, cholesterol, a bunch of things that build up. And they're like an onion. They'll just grow layers and layers. And in some classes, I've seen them. They're like size of walnuts, pretty big. Treatment, they'll give you drugs. Hopefully the drugs will break up the larger stones and you can just pass it. If that doesn't work, they'll put you underwater and then they'll hit you with sonic waves and hopefully that breaks it up. But if that doesn't work, they'll just go in, crush them, or they'll need to remove your gallbladder. Inflammation of the colon. So a lot of things can inflame the colon. One thing is gluten. Have you guys heard of gluten? What is gluten? I've heard of it. It's a protein in wheat, barley, rye, oats, and a lot of people are sensitive to it. So just imagine eating a handful of poison ivy. The response of your colon is the same as if you did that. So anytime you eat gluten, inflammation. They say that sometimes like ADHD can be your sensitivity to gluten, autism, things like that. Cancer in the rectum. So that colonoscopy is going to help identify any papules. Instead of getting a colonoscopy, they have the camera, the pill camera that you can swallow. So every second it'll flash and take a picture. And then instead of having an invasive colonoscopy, they just download the files and look through it. So that might be an alternative in the future. Constipation. Well, they have it now. Just make sure you catch it and don't flush. but usually that is like exploratory. They'll use the capsule to take pictures. And then if they find something or they couldn't really see the pictures well, then they'll do the more invasive colonoscopy. Constipation, so low fluids or low fiber will cause that. If you take aluminum antacids, then that's going to give you constipation. Okay. Crohn's disease, so very similar to colitis or IBS. So here, your mucus is very thick, and because the entire GI tract is lined with mucous membrane, right? Mucus, submucosa. If it's too thick, then you can't really absorb any nutrients. You also have mucous membranes in the lungs. So for some people with Crohn's disease, then that mucus is too thick in their lungs as well, and then they can't breathe. Oh, the inflammation causes the pain. Yeah. So, oh, for the intestines? Oh yeah, the way the intestines detect pain is different. So with cuts, the intestine's not going to really feel it, but it's pressure from stretching, like gas bloating. That's when it hurts, right? When you have really bad gas bloating, and you can actually feel it move from one side to the other. But if it's just cut during surgery, you most likely won't feel it.
That's what the Crohn's is, the pain you have is because of that?
Yeah, from the inflammation. Dia is through, Rhea is to flow. So here you got discharge that's flowing through. So it's increase loose watery stools. So depending on what's regular for the person, as long as it's increase. Diverticulitis. So you have diverticulosis when in your intestines you have these little outcroppings. Right? So this little outcropping is called the diverticulitum. So the inflammation is diverticulitis, the condition diverticulosis. The actual thing is called the diverticula. Right? So don't worry, it's just the same thing. So sometimes these pouchings will get inflamed if you eat foods with seeds like sesame seeds or kiwi seeds, it might clog it. So just some modification in diet will usually prevent any symptoms. Really, really bad, they'll need to come in and then surgically repair these diverticulums. inflammation of the stomach. So gaster is the stomach. And that's usually increased acid. If you use magnesium salts, you usually get diarrhea. If you use aluminum antacids, you usually get constipation. Mag makes you sag. Diarrhea. Heartburn, as mentioned, that cardiac sphincter is very weak. So you might get GERD, gastroesophageal reflux disease. If left untreated, the esophagus is not protected from acid. There's no mucus. There's no bicarbonate buffer system. So it can burn a hole right into the nearby structures. You guys heard of varicose veins on the legs? If it's in the rectum or the anus, it is called hemorrhoids. So preparation H. It takes dilated blood vessels and it shrinks them, right? Hopefully relieving the symptoms. Hepatitis. So if it's caused by a virus, you guys know the difference between hepatitis A, B, C, D?
Yeah, 1 and 2 shots.
Yeah, for the vaccines, a little different. So hepatitis A is foodborne. So if you eat, drink contaminated food, then you will contract hepatitis A. So food industry, if the cook, the food prepper, has hepatitis A, it can pass it into the foods that aren't cooked, like your salad, right? And then you get hepatitis A. Anybody been to Costco lately? There was a hepatitis A outbreak in their frozen berries. So when you make smoothies, do you cook the berries? No, right? B, C, and D. So these are more blood-borne pathogens. So needle sticks, sharing needles, blood transfusion for the hepatitis B, C, and D. So the problem with them is they can lead to cancer. The esophageal hiatus. So that hole in the diaphragm where the esophagus enters, and then you have the stomach. So some of the stomach can then pop back up into the esophagus. So they call that a hernia. For the males, the reproductive tract, as you guys recall, the testes go into the abdominal cavity through the inguinal canal. So for men, usually it's offset and the pressure of the abdominal cavity doesn't really cause any problems. But sometimes those holes will line up and then you'll get some of the intestines protruding. Usually not a problem unless it causes pain or digestive problems. And then they'll fix the canal. Oral cancer. So not just from chemicals like in smoking and chewing tobacco, but also from viral causes. So a virus can lead to tumors. So herpes blisters, that's a type of tumors. Warts, that's a type of tumor, and then they can lead to cancer.
Everything can lead to cancer.
We already got cancer genes. It's what turns these cancer genes on. And as you know, viruses, they hijack your DNA, so they can definitely turn on some of these cancer genes. Pancreatic cancer is a killer. Patrick Swayze, you guys know who Patrick Swayze is?
Yeah.
So he got pancreatic cancer, and pretty much it's a death sentence. They're looking at new treatments where they break down the pancreas into its cells. So there's alpha cells, beta cells, delta cells, and hopefully they can infuse that in a diseased pancreas, and those cells kind of act like stem cells and regrow the pancreas. Stomach cancer. So any part of the digestive system can become cancerous. All right, so that ends digestion. So next time we'll get into nutrition. Chapter 54, I believe.